You know that feeling when everyone thinks they know how a starting position battle is going to end, and then, suddenly, everything changes? Some young players are standing out, veterans are fighting to prove they still have a place on the team, and the coaching staff may have a much tougher decision ahead of them than anyone imagined. Before we begin, like this video if you're excited about the Browns football, and leave a comment if you think this team could surprise a lot of people this season. Let's go! Something very interesting happened during Browns OTAs, and depending on who you ask, it completely changed the outlook of the team's quarterback competition. Just a few weeks ago, it felt like there was a clear favorite to win the starting job. Now, not only has that gap narrowed dramatically, but there are legitimate questions about whether the Browns may have stumbled into a much bigger decision than anyone expected. And the most surprising part is that one of the biggest winners of OTAs might be a player many fans had already written off. As OTAs wrapped up in Cleveland, reports coming out of practice painted a fascinating picture of a team filled with young talent, emerging playmakers, and a quarterback battle that seems far from settled. While mandatory minicamp is now set to begin, the biggest story coming out of Berea revolves around Deshaun Watson and SHEDEUR Sanders, who both found themselves generating significant buzz throughout the voluntary workouts. Let's start with Watson because his inclusion among the biggest winners of OTAs may surprise a lot of Browns fans. Throughout the offseason, there has been plenty of skepticism surrounding Watson. Many fans entered OTAs assuming the Browns were already preparing for a future beyond him. But according to reports coming from practices, Watson looked significantly improved both physically and mentally. His deep ball reportedly looked sharp, and observers noted that the Browns were incorporating designed quarterback runs into the offense again, suggesting increased confidence in his athleticism. There were even reports indicating that his mobility appears much closer to what it once was. Several examples from practice helped fuel that optimism, including a deep connection with rookie wide receiver Denzel Boston that quickly became one of the most talked-about plays from OTAs. For the first time in a long time, there appeared to be genuine momentum building around Watson's ability to compete for the starting job. But here's where things get really interesting. Just when it seemed like Watson might be pulling away in the competition, SHEDEUR Sanders began generating headlines of his own. According to reports referenced throughout OTAs, Sanders made significant progress over the course of the practices. His understanding of the playbook improved rapidly. His efficiency increased. Most importantly, he reportedly showed growth in areas where young quarterbacks often struggle, including protection adjustments and learning the complexities of a professional offense. One report specifically noted that Sanders appeared to have narrowed the gap over the final weeks of OTAs, creating a much more difficult decision for offensive coordinator Todd Monken and the coaching staff. That's a huge development. Because if Sanders continues progressing at this pace when pads come on during training camp, joint practices against the Buffalo Bills, and preseason games, the Browns may eventually face a question they didn't expect to be asking this soon. Could the rookie actually force his way into serious consideration for the starting role? Even Todd Monken's comments reflected just how competitive the situation has become. Monken admitted that in a perfect world, you'd like to know who your starting quarterback is, but he wasn't sure the Browns were there yet. He went on to praise both quarterbacks and stated that he believes Cleveland currently has two starting-level quarterbacks competing for the job. Think about that for a moment. A few months ago, most people assumed this competition would be heavily tilted one way. Instead, OTAs ended with the coaching staff publicly acknowledging that both quarterbacks have made strong cases for themselves. And while the quarterback battle dominated headlines, another player quietly emerged as one of the biggest winners of the entire off-season program: Denzel Boston. The rookie receiver consistently flashed throughout OTAs. Coaches praised his catches in traffic. His size and hands stood out repeatedly, One of the most impressive plays from practice came on a deep route where he hauled in a difficult pass while dealing with tight coverage. Todd Monken reportedly described one of his catches as awesome, fantastic, and extremely encouraging. What's making Browns fans even more excited is Boston's mindset. Reports suggest he's carrying a chip on his shoulder after not being selected in the first round. That motivation appears to be showing up every day on the practice field. Some observers have even started wondering whether Boston could eventually challenge for a much larger role in the offense than originally expected. Then there's Quinshon Judkins. Simply seeing Judkins participating fully in OTAs was viewed as a major victory. After dealing with significant leg injuries, many were eager to see how he would move during off-season work. The answer? Apparently, very well. Judkins was active throughout drills and looked healthy. Reports indicated that teammates, including offensive linemen, were extremely impressed with what they've seen from him so far. One teammate even described him as electric with the football. For a Browns offense desperately seeking explosive playmakers, those are the exact kinds of reviews fans wanted to hear. Of course, every offseason has winners and losers, and one of the players whose stock appears to have taken a hit during OTAs is Dillon Gabriel. While discussions centered around Watson and Sanders, Gabriel was rarely mentioned as part of the competition. Monken's comments about having two starting-level quarterbacks only intensified questions about Gabriel's place on the roster moving forward. The reality is that he no longer appears to be a serious candidate to win the starting job, creating uncertainty about his future in Cleveland. Another name generating concern is Cedric Tillman. As the Browns' receiver room becomes increasingly crowded with established veterans and highly regarded young additions, Tillman faces growing competition for targets and roster security. The lack of significant OTA buzz surrounding him stands in stark contrast to the attention being received by players like Denzel Boston and Isaiah Bond. There was also a brief scare involving defensive lineman Mike Hall Jr. Hall had to be helped off the field after his leg bent awkwardly during a walkthrough session. Fortunately, later updates suggested the injury was not considered serious, but any injury during off-season workouts is enough to cause concern, especially for a player the Browns view as an important young piece moving forward. Perhaps the biggest takeaway from all of OTAs, though, is the growing belief inside the organization that Cleveland's young core may be stronger than many people realize. Multiple young players generated positive reviews throughout the workouts, and there appears to be genuine excitement about the direction of the roster. The biggest remaining questions continue to revolve around quarterback stability and offensive line consistency. If those issues get solved, many inside the building believe this team could be much more competitive than outsiders expect. Now I want to hear from you, Browns fans. Who was your biggest winner from OTAs? Was it Deshaun Watson for putting himself firmly back into the quarterback conversation? Was it SHEDEUR Sanders for rapidly closing the gap? Or was it one of the young playmakers like Denzel Boston or Quinshon Judkins? Drop your answer in the comments below, because this debate is only getting started as we head into mandatory minicamp. As mandatory minicamp approaches, all eyes now turn toward the next phase of this quarterback competition. OTAs gave us clues, but minicamp and training camp are where real separation starts to happen. And right now, the biggest storyline isn't whether Deshaun Watson can make a comeback or whether SHEDEUR Sanders can continue his rapid development. The biggest storyline is that the Browns coaching staff suddenly has a much harder decision than anyone anticipated just a few weeks ago. The reports coming out of Berea suggest that Watson entered OTAs looking healthier, more comfortable, and more confident than he has in quite some time. For a player whose career in Cleveland has been defined by injuries, inconsistency, and frustration, This off-season represented an opportunity to completely change the narrative. And to his credit, he appears to have taken advantage of that opportunity. But what makes this situation fascinating is that Sanders refused to let Watson run away with the job. Instead of looking overwhelmed by the jump to the NFL, Sanders reportedly attacked the learning process. Every week seemed to bring positive reviews regarding his command of the offense, his understanding of protections, and his ability to execute within the system. Those are exactly the areas where rookie quarterbacks usually struggle the most, yet they became some of the strongest talking points surrounding his development. That's why Todd Monken's comments may end up being one of the most important takeaways from the entire OTA period. When an offensive coordinator openly says he sees two starting-level quarterbacks on the roster, that's not coach speak. That's not someone trying to create headlines. That's a coach acknowledging that both players have legitimately given him reasons to believe they can lead the offense. And if that remains true, when the pads come on, this competition could become one of the biggest stories in the NFL preseason. Meanwhile, the emergence of Denzel Boston may be creating another problem for the Browns. But it's the kind of problem every team wants to have. For years, Cleveland has searched for reliable playmakers at wide receiver. During OTAs, Boston consistently generated positive reviews. His size stood out. His ability to make contested catches stood out. His chemistry with the quarterbacks stood out. And perhaps most importantly, his confidence stood out. The Browns clearly believed they found something special when they drafted him, and early returns suggest they may have been right. Then there's Quinshon Judkins, who quietly may be one of the most important players on the entire roster heading into 2025. A healthy Judkins changes everything about this offense. He gives Cleveland a potential workhorse running back. He gives the quarterbacks support. He takes pressure off the passing game. And based on what teammates and coaches have been saying, there's real excitement about what he can become once the regular season begins. If Judkins is healthy, Boston continues developing, and the quarterback position stabilizes, suddenly the Browns' offense starts looking a lot more dangerous than it did a year ago. Of course, there are still concerns. The uncertainty surrounding Dylan Gabriel's future hasn't disappeared. Cedric Tillman's place in the receiver rotation remains unclear. And while Mike Hall Jr.'s injury scare appears to have avoided becoming something serious, it served as a reminder of how quickly optimism can change in the NFL. But overall, the biggest theme coming out of OTAs wasn't concern. It was opportunity. Opportunity for Watson to revive his career. Opportunity for Sanders to accelerate his development and potentially force his way into the lineup. Opportunity for Boston to become a major contributor. Opportunity for Judkins to establish himself as the future of the Browns' backfield. And maybe most importantly, opportunity for this young Browns roster to prove that the rest of the league is underestimating them. Because if these OTA reports translate into training camp and eventually into games, Cleveland may have far more talent than many national analysts are giving them credit for. The next few months are going to tell us a lot about where this franchise is headed. Can Watson hold on to the momentum? Can Sanders continue closing the gap? Can Boston and Judkins turn off-season hype into regular season production? And can this young core finally help push the Browns toward a brighter future? Now I want to hear from you, Browns fans. After everything we've seen and heard from OTAs, who are you most excited to watch when mandatory minicamp begins? Is it Watson, Sanders, Denzel Boston, Quinshon Judkins, or someone else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this Browns update, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss breaking Browns news, training camp updates, roster battles, and everything leading up to the 2025 season. The competition is heating up, and we'll be here covering every step of the journey.